Welcome back to Space This Week! Lots of Starship news to cover this week, as well as more Starlink launches, a very Kerbal moon landing from Japan, the 6th successful commercial flight from Virgin Galactic, more RS-25 engine testing from NASA, and much, much more. Enjoy! SpaceX are continuing their work towards Starship Orbital Flight Test 3, with a lot of goings-on at the launch site this week. Work continues on the orbital tank farm, with some very beefy pipeworks being delivered on Tuesday. Furthermore, we've seen continued installation of the vertical steel reinforcement beams on the vertical GSE Tank 6, after completion of the works on GSE Tank 7. NASASpaceFlight's Jack Bayer provided some great flyover footage, giving us an overview of the current state of the launch area. The launch pad itself has been receiving a lot of attention. We've seen multiple plates lifted off from the ring, with the whole thing lined with scaffolding. Later on in the week, the booster quick disconnect hood was closed, alongside some venting of the tank farm. After this, the pad was swarmed by cherry pickers, as crews began repainting the launch pad legs, getting it looking spick and span for Orbital Flight Test 3. In addition to new tanks and pipes, SpaceX have also been installing new walls at the launch pad. I'm curious how well these things are going to cope being so close to a Superheavy launch. They're completely vertical with no sloping to deflect the force of 33 Raptor engines. Hopefully they will have some deep foundations, or who knows, perhaps we're just waiting for SpaceX to install a berm on the launch-facing side. After successfully completing its cryo-proofing test campaign, Booster 12 was moved from the Macy's test site and temporarily stored at the Rocket Garden. On Tuesday, we saw it moved again. Just as a thick fog began rolling in, the Superheavy was slowly transported to the junction with the Highway. It was then held there for a short while before continuing its move under the cover of night to the Mega Bay. It was then lifted onto a work stand, presumably for crews to begin the installation of its 33 Raptor 2 engines. Also in the Mega Bay is Superheavy Booster 13, which saw the completion of its liquid methane tank last week. You can just about see it through the door to the Mega Bay, but speaking of this, soon we may not be able to quite so easily tell what's going on in there, as SpaceX have begun installing a proper door structure. Here you can see it being lowered, with the Superheavies in the background. Later on, the door itself was installed. As you can see, it's more of a tarp than an actual door because of the sheer height of the bay's opening, but it will serve to keep a more consistent internal environment inside the building, and of course, provide a bit more privacy. There might not be much to see soon enough, especially with the big walls going up around the launch site as well. The Star Factory also provides a bit of occlusion to the build area. Here you can see the High and Mega Bay through the newly built columns of the building, which of course will eventually support the presumably opaque walls to the factory. Next door, Ship 28, the next Starship we'll see hopefully launched to orbit, was sitting in the Highbay. But not for much longer. It was rolled out during the night and is now parked up outside the Highbay. Is this a sign we're close to the FAA issuing a launch license for Flight 3? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And hey, if you're enjoying the flight so far, then a like always helps me out as well. Ship 28 will of course be the Starship for Flight 3, and Booster 10 will be the Superheavy. Last week it had its hot staging ring reinstalled, and since this seals off the internals of the vehicle, it's a very good sign that we are approaching completion of Booster 10 and that we can expect to see another rollout soon. So yeah, both vehicles are looking very close to departing the production site for the final time, ready to, hopefully this time, finally reach orbit. NASASpaceFlight Starbase Live spotted the departure of what we believe to be one of the control flaps for the legendary Starship SN-15. To date, the only Starship prototype ever to perform a successful landing without exploding, which was sadly scrapped by SpaceX last year. Where do you think it's headed? I wonder if it'll be displayed at Brownsville Airport, similar to the current SN-8 flap display. We saw a whopping 3 Falcon 9 flights last week. I know it's basically routine to see multiple Falcon launches at this stage, but can you imagine ULA doing 3 Vulcan launches per week, or Rocket Lab doing 3 Electron launches per week? It is really crazy, the cadence of these flights. Yes, those rockets are very different to Falcon in terms of their purpose, but still, it's fun to think about. I guess the only rocket that comes close is China's Long March, which often sees 1 to 2 flights in a single week, but this is a large fleet of different vehicles, and of course, they're not reusable for now. Anyway, bit of a sidetrack there, but yes, 3 Falcon 9s. The first took place last Wednesday, with the Falcon launching 22 Starlink V2 satellites to low Earth orbit from the Vandenberg Space Force base in California. Unfortunately, we haven't got a video of the launch. SpaceX, of course, now stream all of their launches on X, which is terrible compared to YouTube, and the stream crashed before liftoff. So the earliest footage that we have of the flight starts here, so sorry about that. And SpaceX, please stream on YouTube again. We saw successful landing of the first stage on the Of Course I Still Love You drone ship shortly following stage separation, with this launch and landing being this booster's 16th overall outing. Impressive numbers there. Another impressive achievement of Falcon 9 last week was the fact that the next 2 launches of the week happened on the same day. Today, in fact, Monday the 29th, less than 5 hours apart. These were both Starlink again, with the first launching 23 Starlink V2s from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy, and the second carrying 22 Starlink V2s from Vandenberg. The Kennedy launch was this booster's 18th mission, with the first stage successfully landing on the A Short Fall of Gravitas drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean, while the Vandenberg launch was a newer rocket, this being the first stage's 9th mission, so nearly double digits there. After stage separation, the first stage successfully landed on the Of Course I Still Love You drone ship stationed in the Pacific Ocean. NASA is really stepping up their testing of Aerojet Rocketdyne's upgraded RS-25 engines, which they hope to enter service as the main engines for the SLS rocket for Artemis 5. We saw 2 rounds of testing at the John C. Stennis Space Center in Mississippi last week. The first was on Tuesday and was the 5th of the planned total of 12 hot-fire tests in this, the final round of certification testing ahead of production of the upgraded engines. We saw another similar test 4 days later on the same test stand, bringing us to the halfway mark in the number of planned hot-fire tests. Last week, I covered the sort of successful, sort of unsuccessful landing of Japan's Slim Moonlander. The lander was supposed to tip over on landing, like you can see in this animation, but unfortunately it tipped over too much, 180 degrees instead of 90 degrees, and so its solar panels aren't able to generate any electricity. The team is trying their best to make the most of the situation and do what they can with the lander's battery supply, and the 2 rovers were deployed okay. These rovers are really cool, actually. The first is a rover which will move using a hopping mechanism and carries a couple of cameras and some scientific equipment, and the second rover is a tiny 250-gram rover, also equipped with 2 small cameras. It was with these rover cameras that we are now able to get this new image of the lander, confirming that yes, it's unfortunately flamey end up. I'm told that Tim Dodd is inconsolable right now, and many noticed the kind of funny similarity to the Mun or Bust title screen in Kerbal Space Program. Despite it obviously not going quite as planned, this was still a really big achievement for Japan. Only 4 other nations have ever managed to successfully land on the moon so far. Virgin Galactic's 6th commercial spaceflight took place last week. The spacecraft took off under the wing of its carrier aircraft from Spaceport America, New Mexico, last Friday, before being dropped and blasting its way to space. This was the first time that all 4 of VSS Unity's seats were occupied by private astronauts. I know it's a bit of a point of contention about whether we consider passengers of VSS Unity and New Shepard as actually being astronauts, but hey, their words, not mine, don't shoot the messenger. Some sad news now. After completing a total of 72 flights, NASA's little helicopter that could, Ingenuity, will fly no more. Towards the end of its 72nd flight, it lost communications with the Perseverance rover. Doubts were then had about if it had been destroyed, but thankfully it turns out that it did survive, but with damage to its rotors, meaning that further flight isn't going to be possible. That said, Ingenuity really went above and beyond all of our expectations. Originally, it was only planned to complete 5 powered flights in total. It has really paved the way in validating aerial vehicles for future Mars missions, with NASA now planning the next generation of Mars helicopters. Rest easy, Ingenuity, you are the best. Lowne Aerospace had another busy set of outings last week. I decided to take a break from my tutorial series and launch this, a replica of the Starship Enterprise from Star Trek. I think it came out pretty well, actually. It was a really fun mission. So if you didn't catch it, then it should now hopefully be one of the cards on screen. So you can go ahead and click that. Also take note of my amazing patrons. Their names are on the left there, who make all of this content possible. And I mean that sincerely. I was thinking about stopping Space this week because of the fact that the videos generate less money than the amount I have to pay to license all of this footage. So huge thanks for helping me out there, guys. But yep, that's the end. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.